Hey, what's up everybody? This is the Helpful Hacker, and today we are going over the Hydra room from TryHackMe. So we'll get started with task number 1, the introduction. So, what is Hydra? So Hydra is a brute force online password cracking program. Now, something that you need to know when I say brute force, that means more than just than just regular brute forcing, right? So when I hear brute force, and when I was first learning cybersecurity, I was under the impression that a brute force attack is where you guess all possible combinations of a password to see if you can get that password. Now, that is a brute force attack, but when you refer to brute force attack, you're actually really referring to a much broader category of attacks. So this includes things like dictionary attacks, credential stuffing, password spraying, and all the stuff like that, right? So when it says Hydra is a brute force online password cracking program, remember it does a whole lot more than just like your traditional brute forcing of a password, right? We have dictionary attacks and we can do lots of other cool stuff with it. So keep that in mind. But basically what it does is Hydra helps you get the password and login for all of these things listed down here, right? You can see all of those. So these are all the protocols that Hydra can help us get the password or login for. So we have SMB, SMTP, SSH, FTP, and then all these HTTP ones. We start right there, yeah. So all these HTTP ones, this has to do with web sites. So when you go onto a website and you log in, these are the protocols that are going to be used on that website, and it's going to be one of these, and then Hydra can help us hack those. So we can go to a website and actually try to use a brute force attack to log into a website. So Hydra, super cool, really useful. If you want more information, you can follow this link. That'll take you to the Kali tool page. You can read about it. Yeah, lots of examples here. And does Hydra have a wizard or like a graphical user interface? Yes, it does. I did not know that. Okay. Learn something new every day. I've only ever used it in the terminal. So there's that. Then, so you can read through all that. And I guess when they say brute force online passwords, again, we're talking about a lot of different types of attacks. So I'm not going to explain all of them. But real quickly, for those who don't know, the importance of having strong passwords, just one example, and this is, what we're going to do here in task number 2, is we're going to use dictionary attacks. So if you have a password that is a common password, then instead of us trying to, brute force and guess every combination, we can do what's called a dictionary attack, where we take a long list of like the top 10,000 or 1 million passwords and we test all of them, right? That's a dictionary attack. So a normal well-built application is going to not allow us to do that. And you've probably seen this where if you guess a password too many times, it'll block you. But if application isn't well built in that sense and doesn't have some of those protections, then this is a very effective attack, because most people, hence why it's the 1 million or 1,000 or 10,000 most common passwords, most people use them. That's how they get on the list. So read through all this and keep in mind that it's super important to have strong passwords. Now, installing Hydra, if you're using the attack box, it's already on. If you use Kali Linux, it should already be on Kali Linux. But if you're not using either of those and you want to download it, you can check out the official repository for it right here. And then you can use these commands, or one of these 2 commands, if you're on a Linux distribution. So yeah, read through all that and then mark complete. And with that, you are done with task number 1. So task number 2, here we're going to actually use Hydra, but the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start the machine, hit that button right there. I've already done that. And then it wants us to navigate to this website. So we'll open our browser. And in a second, go to that website. And then after that, we'll learn about some Hydra commands. Okay, sweet. So we get this login page, which makes sense because we're doing a Hydra room. So we're going to be trying to get someone's password. So Hydra commands. You can read through all this. It gives us some basic commands where it gives us a basic example here. So you start out with Hydra, which is what actually calls the tool. So that's always going to be the first thing you do. Then it gives you, you'll want to do user and password. Now, the way that this works is if you do a lowercase l, then you just put the username. So if you do a lowercase l, that means you only want to try one username, or that means you know the username for the login. Now, if you did a capital L, that would mean you're going to use a list of potential login names, okay? And then it's the exact same thing with password. So here we have a capital -P. So what that's going to do is that's going to give us a list of passwords. Now, if we had just put a lowercase p there, then we're assuming that we already know the password, or we're just guessing one at a time, which wouldn't make any sense. So if you put a lowercase p there, then that means you're just using the one password. So keep that in mind. These will, I can't think if there's any exceptions. I don't think there are. These are always going to be the first two things that you put in. You're either going to put a user or a user like list, like a list of usernames, and then that will be followed by either a password or a list of potential passwords. So here they kind of give us the example. This example is for SSH. And then right here they tell you the lowercase l specifies an actual one specific login. The capital P is a list of passwords. And then the -T, that's going to set the number of threads. So, what are threads? How do I explain this? So, threads are like, you can think of it as when you have a computer can actually do multiple things at once. Okay? So, when we say -T or threads, you can think of a thread as like an independent worker that can handle its own task, right? So, think of it as like, yeah, just think of it as like a worker at a company, like a single individual. They can do one thing at a time, right? So with computers, you can have multiple threads, which means you can do multiple things simultaneously, okay? So by default, Hydra actually uses 16 threads, which means Hydra doesn't try one password at a time and then move on to the next. Hydra actually tries 16 passwords at a time, then moves on to the next chunk of like 16 passwords simultaneously. And that's because by default, it runs with 16 threads. Now here they change it down to 4. So why would you do that? Because running at 16 threads, if you think about it, that's going to be a lot faster, right? But if you run with too many threads against certain protocols, the protocol can actually get overwhelmed, and it can cause problems. It can like overwhelm the target that you're trying to get, and that can cause performance issues, or it could even potentially like trigger security measures if your threat is too high and you're attacking something too strongly. So for that reason, you have the option to change the number of threads, right? So if you're attacking a really old machine, you know it'll be easily be overwhelmed. You can lower the thread count, which is essentially how many passwords or how many tasks are you running simultaneously. So that's what the T is. Now, this gives us a full example right here. You can read through it, and then it's going to talk about web form. Okay, so the exact same thing, like I said. So this sudo, that just gives you like top privileges when you run this command. Most of you shouldn't have to do that. You can just run Hydra because you're probably running as a privileged user. So don't worry about that unless you do the command and then it doesn't work. Then you can throw in sudo. Usually it'll let you know that you need to do it as sudo. But for most of you, that shouldn't be a problem. So again, Hydra, you get the username, the word list, the IP. So here, this is the username. Again, -L, just like before, -P. So that's going to give us a word list of passwords. So it doesn't say that here, but that word list isn't just a word list of anything. It's a word list of passwords. Now, then we do the IP address, which again, similar to, well, it's a little different with FTP, but here it's the same with SSH. So IP address, that's what we're attacking. Then we have this HTTP post form. Okay. Now, with all of these, I'm going to go back up here. There's a bunch of these. 99% of the time, and don't hate me if I'm wrong because I said 99%, which means that's not always. You're going to use a post. Honestly, most likely you're going to use either an HTTP post. So you have HTTP post, HTTP form post, and then HTTPS form post, and then HTTPS post. Those ones are kind of like the ones you're going to use the most often, but you can use all of these. I'm not going to go over each one and what makes them different. I will show you how to figure out which one we need to use in the example, but you can just give each of these a Google and figure out why they have so many different HTTP protocols. But that's because websites can be built in a lot of ways and they can submit credentials in a lot of ways. So that's what comes next oftentimes is something like this. So that'll either be HTTP or HTTPS, and it's usually a post. You can occasionally, I haven't seen it in a long time because I'm pretty sure it's not very secure, but you can do this with a GET request, but that's not very common. So that's the protocol after this IP address. Then we have this. So what is all this? This is pretty much just like additional data that in this case we're doing a form. So the form needs it, right? I don't know how else to explain it other than that. Like, this is all just additional information that we're going to need. And for whatever reason, I think because it's technically form data, I could be wrong about that. But for whatever reason, this is how they want us to format it, where you have path, semicolon, or colon, login credentials, colon, invalid response, and then put that all in parentheses. But the syntax is not super important because you can always Google that. What's important is understanding what's happening here. So the path, this is going to be the path to the actual login page. Because if you're dealing with a web application that has a lot of pages or something, and you just give it this IP address, that's just going to take it to the home page, right? And Hydra needs to know where exactly is this login page. So for some websites, it may be the home page. For other ones, it may be something different. In our case, we have this /login that we're probably going to use. So that's what that is. So this tells you how to get to the login page. The login credentials. So here, I don't like that they call this login credentials, but to be honest, I don't know what else I would call it. So what this is how the format in which the website actually sends the username and password. And we're going to take a look at this when we get into the example. So hopefully that will make a little bit more sense. But on this website, they have username equals, and then it gives the username, and password equals, and then it gives the password. On other websites, this might not be username. It might just say user equals, or instead of password, it might just say pass equals, right? So we need to make sure that this part leading up to where we're going to insert our username and passwords that we want to try matches the website. And then we have this user and this password surrounded by those symbols. So what that is that's where we're putting our stuff. So when I say Hydra username, whatever username I put here is going to be inserted right there. And Hydra knows that's where to put it because of those symbols surrounding it. And Hydra always it defaults to the word user and pass. So every single password from this word list, we're going to try each one of them by putting them here. Okay. So that's what that is. So that's an important piece of information. And again, we'll see in the example later how that really works. Then we have invalid response. So this is part of the response when the login fails. Why do we need this? Because Hydra needs to know whether we messed up or whether we succeeded, right? Because, we're running this through a program and the program has to be able to tell, okay, when did the password work? So the easiest way to do this is you guess a random password and username that you know is probably going to be wrong. And then you take a look at the output, and oftentimes a web application will say, sorry, username and password invalid or incorrect. So what you can do is you can put invalid or incorrect here, and then every time Hydra runs, it'll look for that in the response. And if it sees it, then it knows, okay, that one didn't work. Now I'm going to try the next one. And then eventually Hydra, when it doesn't see that, it'll tell you, hey, I found a login that actually works because there was no invalid response. And again, kind of hard to conceptualize. It's a lot easier to understand with the example. Then the last part of this is a verbose output, so -v. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to let you know how every single attempt goes. If you don't include this, Hydra will just run. It doesn't really tell you anything, and then it'll give you the results at the very end. So if you actually kind of want to see it going through each attempt, then you have to include this -v at the end so that it, will actually show you each try, even if it's wrong. So these are what the different symbols kind of represent, their description and what you need to put there. Here's an actual example, right? So in this case, Hydra L username -p word list. That's pretty straightforward. We have the IP. This is a post form. Now again, this is where the syntax kind of changes. So you got to remember this. So this first part, this is the path. So /. So what that tells me is that the login is on the very first page, right? So that would be quite a bit like ours, right? We could do /login, or we could just do /, and this would probably work, right? So that's what that is, just the /. Then we have our colon and the username, password, and again, we'll give you a concrete example of why this looks the way that it does, and you'll kind of see, I already explained it a little bit. Then we have this F equals incorrect, and then -v. So this is a string that appears when the login fails. So incorrect, right? I said maybe you could do something like invalid, incorrect. So what we have to do to figure out what word or what phrase to put here, we actually before we have to test the website and then see how it works. So now that we've gone through all these examples, again, make sure you've read through everything. We can actually try and crack this. So first thing I'm going to do is we need to figure out some information about how this works. So I am going to right click and inspect, and this is going to open up the dev tools. So let me go to, we're going to go to network, and we're doing this because we want to see how this username and password actually work. So I'm just going to do ASDF and then password ASDF, and I'm going to try to log in. Okay, so here we see it says your username or password is incorrect. Okay, so that's important, right? Because remember, we need this invalid response. So it looks like the invalid response word we're probably going to use, and they already used it, so we kind of know that, is incorrect. So anytime Hydra sees incorrect, it's going to know, oh man, my login didn't work, so I got to try a different one. So now we know that. Now the next thing I want to figure out, now that we know the invalid response string that we're going to use, we got to figure out this. Now I'm sure it'll match, but you should understand why it matches and how you would do it if you didn't have TryHackMe to tell you the format. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the login request. Again, in my experience, 99% of the time, you're going to be in a post request if you're logging into something. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to do this post login and see what we get. So over here, and if you don't use developer tools a lot, this might be a lot, but you'll get used to it, and you'll probably use these developer tools a lot if you do web application stuff. So we can see post, this is where it's posting to. We have headers and all that. So we know it's a post request, right? So let me look at the request. Okay. So here is our form data. And this is the payload essentially. This is what we're sending over to the server. And it says username space, parentheses, ASDF password, parentheses. Now, does that format look like this? Username equals something and password equals something? No, it doesn't. So why? That's because if we come over here, so this is what developer tools likes to make things easy for us to read and understand. So they've changed this. The developer tools made this nice and easy so I could understand how this web application is working. But I actually want the raw data. Here we go. And if we look, this raw data format, it looks exactly like this. But where we have user and where we have password, I put ASDF. So we see that username equals ASDF and password equals ASDF. So we want to take that, and that's what would go inside of our login credentials. That goes in that spot here. So you could just copy that, paste it in there, and then you would change ASDF and the password ASDF, and you would just insert these so that Hydra knows where to put the username and where to put the password. Okay? So that's how you would figure that out. Let me see. Is there anything else? Let me just do a real quick. Is there not just a... I don't want a selection source. I just want to view the whole source. Can I not do that? Okay, fine. I guess we'll go to inspect. I thought I could hit, normally they have like a view source button and it just opens it all for you. Okay. So if we look, so how do we know, another thing that I forgot to bring up is how do we know it's, well, one, how do we know it's HTTP and not HTTPS? That's really easy because if we were to copy this, and I'm just going to copy this and paste it right in here so we can see the actual URL. This is, oh, that did not work because TryHackMe is trying to format it for me. I don't know why I did that when I could just do this instead. So yeah, this is how we know. So when we go to this website, it's HTTP instead of HTTPS. So we already know that whatever protocol we're going to use, it's going to be HTTP and it's going to have post. Okay. So now we have HTTP post, and we have HTTP form post. Okay, so the difference here is that this HTTP form post, this is specifically designed for handling HTTP requests that have form data. And if we remember back to our example, is it really going to make me redo it to get the network? By the way, I'm not hating on Firefox. Firefox is great, but I like Google DevTools way more. Firefox is great for other things, but DevTools, I think Google's got them beat. So here we go. It says right there that we have form data, and then on top of it, if we go to The inspector, we can see we have a form, right? And what's inside that form when we open it up, we have this input, and it's going to be, we're going to input the password, we're going to input the username, in this case input email or whatever. But it's clear when you look at the inspector and when you look at the traffic that what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with form data. And so that's what this HTTP form post is specifically designed for, when you need to parse through form data. Now, an HTTP post request, or not request, an HTTP post for like Hydra, that protocol, when it uses that, that's really for generic HTTP post requests where you maybe don't need to handle form data, right? So if we had a post request with and it wasn't form data, then that's what we would use. So most of the time, if you're trying to log into something or, crack a login, you're going to be using this form post, and it's going to be either HTTP or HTTPS most of the time. Now, again, it has all these other ones for a reason, because things happen and people build lots of different kinds of websites. So now that we know that, we have a really good understanding of this, and we can actually formulate our attack. Formulate? I don't know. Is formulate a word? I think it is. But anyways, we can actually build our attack. So we're going to open up the terminal. First thing we're going to do is Hydra. And then what we can do here is, if you need to, you can reference all of this stuff, because it's essentially going to be almost the exact same as this. I am not going to, because I think I can remember most of it off the top of my head. We'll see. It'll be a fun test. So we got to answer the question though. How use Hydra to brute force Molly's web password. So Hydra, we know it's Molly. So I can do a lowercase -l, and then we can put Molly, because we know it's Molly, so we're just using the one. Now I need to figure out the password. So I need to put a capital P. Now I need to provide a password list. So I'm going to provide the whole file path to the list that I want to use. So here's a question for you. How do you know which list to use? Well, if you play a lot of CTFs, you might know where these tend to be stored and which ones tend to be used. But if you don't, that's what they have the hint for. So if you hit the hint, it says if you've tried 30 passwords from rockyou.txt, you are doing something wrong. Okay, so rockyou.txt, where is it? How do I know where to find it, right? Do I have to search the whole system to find it? No, you don't. I happen to know where it is because, again, it gets used a lot. And then, so it's under user, share, wordless, and then rockyou.txt. So I just entered that because I didn't finish it, and I'll explain why. So if you did not know where that is, right? So let's say you're just like, I have no idea what rockyou.txt is. I mean, obviously from the clue, you should know it's a password, but how do you find it? So I'm going to show you real quick. I'm not going to go too in depth on this, but I am going to quickly show you how to actually find this if you don't know where it is. So you can use the find command, and then the /. This means it's going to search the whole system for you, right? So then we're going to do -type, and that's going to be followed by F. So what that does is we're looking for a file type. So we're not looking for a directory or anything else. We're looking for a file. Then we want to find it by name. So I'm going to do -name. And the name of this file, I think you need to put these in quotes. rockyou.txt. Again, I think you need to put that in quotes. I'm not totally sure, but we'll find out here in a sec. So then what you want to do is you want to do this. You're going to pipe that out to /dev/null. Now, so again, find, we're looking for something, /, we want to search the whole computer, type F, so we're looking for a file. We want to find it based on name. So we don't want to use regex or anything else. We want a name match. And the name that we're looking for is rocku.txt. And then this last part, this to, piped out to dev/null, that is just so that we don't have to look at all of the errors. I'm not going to explain how that works. You'll see it a lot. People use it a lot. So you'll learn that over time. It's a bit out of the scope of this room. I just wanted to show you what command you could run to actually find rocku.txt in case you don't know where it is. Because even based off the hint, if we look back at this hint, it just tells you it's rocku.txt. It doesn't tell us exactly where it is. Now, I think I did this right. We'll see how long it takes for it to actually find it. Okay, there you go. See? So it found it. It took it a second, but it's /user share wordless rocku.txt. So I wanted to show you that because some of you, in the future, if you ever need to find something, that's a good way to do it. And yeah, the room doesn't do a good job of explaining to you how to use rocku.txt or where it is or even what it is. So I guess I will. Rocku.txt is, I think it's the most common million passwords. You can get it in different sizes. So I don't know what size this one is, but rocku.txt is a bunch of passwords from either one big data breach or a bunch of data breaches. I don't remember, but basically it's a very common password list that a lot of cybersecurity professionals use to test, to either try to, break login forms and steal and figure out passwords, or it's really a good standard for your own rules. If you're, on the defensive side, you would use this to make sure that one of your users doesn't have a password that matches anything on rocku.txt, because again, it's really common. So now that we've gone off that trail to help you understand what rocku.txt is and how to find it on this system, now we are going to also, I guess if you're not using the attack box, you'll have to download rocku.txt. Just search rocku.txt sec lists. It should, the Google search should pop up like a Git repository of a bunch of different security lists, and rocku.txt should be on there. So if that's wrong and somebody tries it and they figure out how to actually find it, you should leave that in the comments for everybody else who's not using the attack box. But yeah, okay, so back to our actual Hydra attack that we're trying to build here. It's just taking us a hot minute. Okay, so now we have our word lists. So what's going to come after the word list is our target IP address. So if I move this out of the way, that's going to be 10.10.142.34. And I am just pulling this from right here, this login page right here, because it's up there, or you could pull it from right here. There's our target IP address. So that's who we're after. Now, the next part is the method that we're going to use. So again, we already talked about this. It's going to be the HTTP form post, or post form, sorry. Okay, and yeah, we already talked about why it's that, so you can refer back to that if you're still not sure, maybe watch it again. Then the next thing we got to do is, this is the part that has kind of a different syntax. So we're going to do /login. Now why? Why are we going to do login followed by, so we're going to do /login because that's where our login page is, right here. Okay. So that's why we're doing that, because if we go back to our documentation here, this is the path. So this is the path to the actual login page, right? Where did my terminal go? Come back up for me. There we go. So that's what that is. Then the next part is going to be the actual payload. So this is username, and that was equals user and password equals pass. I think that's it. So then, and then the last part, f equals, I can't remember if I need to put quotes around the, so, well, first I'll explain. So again, username equals user and password equals pass. We got that when we were inspecting the web page. Okay, so we've already been over that part. So hopefully that makes sense. Now the invalid response, this is what we're looking for so that Hydra knows when it didn't work. So in our case, if I remember correctly, yeah, user login is incorrect. So that's the word that we're going to put here. So F equals, and that stands for like the F equals is the bad response. And we're going to put incorrect. I just don't remember. Okay, so we don't have to put quotations around incorrect. But we do have to end this whole thing in quotations, because that whole thing has to be in quotes. And then the last part, we're going to do -v, and that is for verbose. And I'm doing that so you can kind of see how Hydra actually works when we do this. So then we'll run it. Okay, that wasn't too bad at all. So we can see here, because I put verbose, it tells us what it does. It lets us know it's resolving this address. And then it's following this page redirect to login, and it's trying different logins. And then it quickly finds, this is the host, this is the login, and here is the password. So now we know what her password is. Does it ask us for her password or just no? It just wants the flag. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, now we know that the password is Molly, or the username is Molly and the password is Sunshine. So now when we log in, we can see the flag right there. If it'll let me highlight it and copy it, please. And then we can paste that in. And with that, we are done with question number 1. Now it's on to question number 2. Use Hydra to brute force Molly's SSH password. Okay, this one will be quite a bit easier. So I'm actually just going to exit out of this because we don't need that anymore. And something that you'll get good at doing is just hitting the up arrow, and then you can rebuild your queries, right? So again, we're going to use Hydra for again, because that's how you call the tool. Then Molly, password. We're still, for this one, I'm going to assume that we're still using rocku.txt, right? Because, yeah, I mean, we should. That would make sense, because this one doesn't actually have a hint for us, so you kind of have to just assume that that's the one. So that followed by the IP address. And then the other thing that we're going to do, and we're going to do this only because they did it, and so I'm sure they have that in there for a reason, but we're going to set threads to 4. Because again, I don't know what's on the back end here, but whatever this machine up here is, we don't want to overwhelm it. Maybe if we have the thread count too high, it'll crash or something. I don't know. So because of that, we're going to do the -T4 to set the thread count to 4. And then the protocol that we're attacking is SSH. Okay. So you can see when we're attacking a more specific protocol, not something as broad as like, a website's login page, because that can be built in a lot of ways. The syntax is a lot easier when we're attacking something more specific like FTP or SSH. So this is the command. You should be able to run that, and then we will see what we get back. Okay, so here we go. We can see, and the other nice thing is we can see the difference here between verbose and not verbose. So this was verbose because it's letting us know everything it's doing. And this is what you would get when you don't put the -v. It's just going to kind of tell you the important stuff and then give you it if it actually finds it. Or if it didn't find it, it would just let you know, hey, I didn't find this. So now we can see we have Molly, and her password for SSH is butterfly. So now, let me go back down here. They want us to log in and find flag 2. So now I can do SSH Molly at, and then this is where I got to put the IP address. So I'm going to copy that to clipboard. I'm going to paste that. So this is for SSH. I'm not going to explain this one too much. Hopefully you kind of know a bit about SSH, but this is just the syntax to actually try and log into SSH. So it's SSH username at, and then you give the IP address that you're actually trying to SSH into. It's going to ask you, hey, are you cool with connecting to this? You can just put yes. Now you have to put in the password, and that's butterfly. It's not going to show you. But you put that in. Now we can see that we went from root at our IP address to now we're Molly at our target IP address. So now we can ls, and we see right there we got flag2.txt, so we can just cat that. And there is our flag. So we can just copy that and paste it in here. And before we do that, if you guys have enjoyed the video, if you've watched it this far, please like and subscribe. That helps me out a lot. Also, a big shout out to any of my members. All my members are awesome, and they help me out so that I can make all these videos for everybody. I really appreciate them. So you can check that out. Just go to my channel and click on members. It should be under, I think, every single video. So you can check that out there. And now that we've done that, you can paste that in, hit submit. And with that, you have finished the Hydra room from TryHackMe.